Hello and welcome back to video number 4 of part 2 in my gameplay demo and kind of basic walkthrough of features in War in the Pacific Admiral's Edition. I'm Slippery Pete, and in this video I'm going to talk about a couple of things. First off, one thing that I haven't really touched on much is what options a player starting a new game might have, and also a few things that aren't really in the manual that I actually figured out from reading the forums for this game. Can make the experience a little bit better for you. First thing I will show you is just some of these toggle switches here. So first off, if you want to play against the Japanese computer, you select this. If you want to play against an Allied controlled computer, you select here. You can have the two AIs go at it, and I've actually seen pretty amusing results where like Japan walked all over the Allies in the first year of the war and actually won. You can also play by email or head-to-head. Play by emails where two people just send their turns back and forth and the game runs it. That's kind of the thing a lot of the experts at this game do, and playing against a real person is a lot more fun than playing against an AI, because the AI is really good at handling logistics, which is one of the more annoying and boring parts of the game. And they always make sure every place is defended at least in some sort of token way, where a human player might leave a few holes, and makes for a more interesting game. Or head-to-head, where people sit down at the same computer and run their turns. So in game options, you can turn off a lot of things that you see in the UI. I have all these things set to yes, but some of the things that you might not want to see are set facilities to expand at start. That takes up some of your supply at a base, and which is kind of bad for rear areas that will never see action at all in the game unless you do really bad. But the important things are this turn cycle option. I think you basically, this is what I'm thinking of. What turn cycle is where you can select how many days run between each time you give orders. So right now I have it set to 1, so after each day in the game, then I can give more orders. But to speed up the game and make it a little bit more force the players to think a little farther ahead, you can speed it up to 2 or even 3 turns. And also we have the AI difficulty. Goes from easy to historical to hard to very hard. I have it set to historical because I don't know what I'm doing, or I didn't know what I was doing when I first started, but wanted to be able to brag about holding Singapore for an extra 2 months in 1942. Without having the computer have an unfair advantage, or me having an unfair advantage. Next thing down here, preferences. Nothing really major here, so just volumes and things like that. Nothing that really affects the gameplay. We have scenario selection. You can see all the different scenarios you can play. This is why I mentioned in the very first video that I was playing scenario 1. Have a whole bunch of these. If you get the game, you can read the descriptions. For beginners of the game, I recommend first starting out with the Battle of the Coral Sea, just to get a feel for how naval task forces kind of work, and then Guadalcanal for something that's a little bit more strenuous in terms of supply and managing logistics in the game. So I'm going to load up my save again. Actually, while that's loading, I want to show you real quick some of the options you can do. So I'm right-clicking on my War in the Pacific desktop shortcut, hitting Properties. And so in the target, you want to be able to pass a few options into the executable file. And you can see what I've got here. -W, don't remember what that does. -deep color, that kind of improves the color quality of the game. And then these last two parameters are the window resolution. I'm going to move my War in the Pacific window just a little bit. It actually is a windowed app, as you can see here. So it's actually a little primitive in that regard. But its default resolution is 1024 by 768, so you don't really get to see too much at once. And I wanted to see more of the playing field, so you can actually expand the playing field in that way, but just by passing these parameters in. I could go all the way up to 1080p if I wanted, but 1440 by 900 is good enough for me. So anyway, back to the game. I did a lot of things off camera, and I'll just kind of rehash over them. First off, I want to just reiterate the scope of the game. Here's Africa, part of Africa in the east. Or in the west, silly me. Go west, or we go east this time. Got my directions all mixed up. Past India, Tibet, China, Soviet Union. There's the Arctic Ocean. And all the way to Canada. From north to south, I'll start somewhere where you'll actually see things. Tibet, Burma, Indochina, which you now know as Laos and Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaya, Borneo, Java, Australia, all the way to the south. Unfortunately, you don't get to see Antarctica. It makes me sad. If you did, it would probably be where this big War in the Pacific badge is hanging out. So, with a game of this scope, it's really easy to forget things. One thing that is easy to forget is supplying and logistics. I'll get into that in just a moment. But also, just telling your units what to do. Off camera, I have this bombardment force that was just sitting there. I made sure to assign it to move to Bangkok and then wreck the airfield and port there once again as soon as it gets repaired. And then I wanted some of these units, well, not ones in that hex, the ones in this hex, to try another attack, since its opposing force has been deprived from supply for quite a while now. And just wanted to double check to make sure all of my bombers at Shanghai have their orders to bomb Nagasaki once again. And one thing I forgot and haven't dealt with yet was how to get some aviation support units to follow up this invasion I got in the Philippines. Right now I got some fighter groups that are in boxes right now, and they won't be able to do anything without some aviation support. So I'll have to fix that up in about the next 10 turns, or else I might be in a precarious position. Let's see. Next thing I'd like to talk about are victory conditions. So I'm going to hit I. You can also tap on one of these icons here. Here it is, View Intelligence Reports. And this brings up a couple things. It shows, all the aircraft related stuff that's gone on. I'm flying several times, about 3 times more sorties than the Japanese per turn. Shows air-to-air losses. We had some big engagements during that turn I demonstrated. But one of the real important things here is the score, and that kind of brings you to victory conditions that I alluded to several times and never really got to talking about because I kept running out of time in my videos. So there's one thing called auto victory, and it depends on the year, but depending on the year, if one player has a certain times many points as the other player, then they automatically win. I think in 43 it's if you have 4 times as many points, you auto victory is invoked. In 44 it's 3 times as many, 45 it's 2 times as many. And then at that point, I don't know when the game ends, but then from then on you get some kind of certain, like 1.75 times as many points as the other player, that gives you a major victory. 1.5 times is a regular victory, and 1.25 is minor victory, or maybe almost a defeat if you're playing as the Allies and still can't win by that time. So that covers victory conditions. You also notice Soviet's not active in here, and the Soviet Union can be activated if Japan doesn't have enough troops stationed here in Manchu. But I guess fortunately for them, they've they've been keeping their garrison up. Let's see. You can also see what your signals intelligence people say. It's things like radio transmissions detected a certain hex. That doesn't really tell you too much other than there's stuff happening there. But sometimes it says, you know, this unit, 15th Division, is planning for an attack on a certain hex. So earlier in the game, that can give you a good idea of where some of the major attacks are going to come. And it also might even tell you it's this unit's embarked on a ship moving to somewhere, which can be really helpful. And it also tells you how many men are located at a certain hex as well. And you can also view the weather. This is sort of an important thing in that you know, if there's thunderstorms going on in a certain region, you're probably going to be a little bit more safe from air attack. Also, if naval combat goes on, they get sort of a reduced visibility penalty. Next thing to mention real quick is supplies and fuel. You might have noticed if you've been looking at this game in screenshots, you see sometimes there's a hex with an exclamation mark, either yellow or red, over it. What that means, the yellow exclamation mark, is a base is getting low on supply. And if it's red, it's getting really low on supply. So you need to send a convoy from a major supply or production area like, you know, Sydney in Australia. It's got over 1 million supply points. And send those up and fill up this base's coffers again. And also, there's a difference between supply and fuel. Supply means basically anything like ammo, aviation support, aviation fuel, replacement weapons, replacement parts, things like that, food, what have you. And then fuel doesn't concern aviation fuel. It just covers naval fuel. So, you know, you can still fly planes out of bases that aren't getting fuel. But you can't, you know, replenish any ships there. So overall, there's just a couple of, well, quite a few actually, UI annoyances that I have with this game. You know, one thing I'd really like in future iterations is, you know, I want to transfer all these B-29 bomber groups from Karachi over to Chittagong. I demonstrated this earlier, but I can only do this one at a time. You know, you have to click so much in this game to get even simple tasks done, and it makes logistics, which already isn't very fun, a lot less fun. Also, there's bugs here and there. You know, again, for logistics, one time there were, you know, about 10 units I wanted to move from this Eastern USA base down to San Francisco. So I set them all to move by railroad, but and then set them all to follow. But then, just a little bit later, like the next turn, only one of them moved. So, things like that. Also, you know, the game relies upon you reading a 300-page manual with some material lifted from the previous game and isn't kept current. So you get some wrong info in there too. That's kind of annoying. But that said, I think the complexity does make for pretty realistic interpretation of World War II, since it's hard to tell exactly what's going on. Although, I don't know, I'm kind of worried that the fun might wear off once I learn everything. So, that concludes part 2 of my 3-part series on War in the Pacific Admiral's Edition. In part 3, I'm going to run this turn just to kind of show you some of the results of some of the things that I did. And offer just a few final thoughts. And, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. My apologies for all the coughing earlier and just stumbling over words and stuff. But I hope you got a great idea of what's involved in actually playing this game. See you next time.